If there was ever an era that channeled the pure randomness and madness of YouTube titles and clickbait, it was the Silver Age. A time full of covers and concepts fit to make you scratch your head, but at the same time part of you needs to know. Does the cover happen? How? Why? Cover bait at its finest. There's an art to having bait that is both eye-catching but not overly misleading or manipulative, leaning more into marketing than straight up manipulation. It's a balancing act. It's an art. There's an art to it, one that I do not possess. Wish I could be a Silver Age cover artist. All of this rambling preamble is to set up the idea of, have you ever wanted to just take a stroll through some of these issues just behind the cover? Look inside some of these outrageous covers. They always make all those lists of these are the weirdest, or these are the strangest, or these are some other synonym for one of those words. Because I have, and I'm doing it. And I'm taking you with me, if you want to come, of course. Particularly at DC, because the Silver Age means very different things in Marvel and DC. Marvel only becomes Marvel in the 1960s, well into the Silver Age, so the scrutiny around them and their evolution is very different than DC, who had to bear a lot of the brunt and had characters at the forefront when the tide turned to censorship. Marvel evaded some scrutiny by rebranding, creating a different relationship with the CCA in a post-code world. So you're gonna get way more zany covers out of the DC side of things during this era. It's hard to pick from among them. So I decided upon The Flash, issue 115, for a couple of reasons. One, we don't talk about The Flash enough, particularly not during his quote-unquote boring years. There are some glorious letters about how The Flash was boring during this time period, and every time I find one, I will read it to you, because you know I love to read you a good letter from the letters column. 2. Characters getting fat seems to be a subgenre of the Silver Age. In some cases, it was even requested. We found a letter in the letters column specifically saying they'd like to see Jimmy Olsen get plump. See, fandom the same across time. Just like how Golden Age Wonder Woman would be right at home in certain modern era hub searches. Now some may dismiss these stories out of hand, feeling that there can't be anything to a premise so flimsy, or that it must be mean-spirited. Well, let's find out. I'm curious. I want to know. The Day the Flash Weighed 1,000 Pounds comes to us from the year 1960, written by John Broome with art by Carmine Infantino. Inks Joe Giella. I love that Julius Schwartz, the editor, who would later do things like get rid of the first Batwoman for being too silly, was like, large Flash, 10 out of 10, would write again. Or maybe not, because there's some loose editing at points in this. This is not one of Infantino's finest covers out there. It feels like they're struggling to fit everything in, and the transformation beam ends up making the page feel very cramped vertically. On the trail of an elusive crook whose gang consists of trained chimps, the Flash runs into an unexpected obstacle himself as he suddenly becomes so fat he can hardly walk. Stop, you had me at gang of trained chimps. It could have stopped right there. The Flash comes across a gang of trained chimps. Okay. You think you're fat now, Flash. Watch what this gimmick does to you next. So after hearing all of that and seeing this teaser page, would you ever guess this was a Gorilla Grodd story? Because this is a Gorilla Grodd story. We open on Gorilla Grodd in his prison in Gorilla City, and we get a nice little editor's note to the last Grodd appearances. This time, Solivar, the leader of Gorilla City, has truly created a prison from which he cannot escape. But Grodd is a genius, so he found a way out. He concocted a pill made out of the special elements of the earth in his cell. So all I'm thinking is that he rolled up a little ball of dirt. But no, it's more than that. This is science. Silver Age science, the best kind, for fun, not accuracy. According to my calculations, this pill will make me collapse. Then at the instant I die, my mind and memory will leave me and enter some other living being. It's a terrible risk. I might enter the body of a fish, an insect, a bird, a wild animal, and be trapped that way for years. I really want to see the universe where Grodd terrorizes Barry Allen as a mosquito, but I must take the chance. It's the only way I can get out of here. So he takes the pill and he dies. Solivar checks and declares that yep, he's definitely dead. So he has to go call the Flash and tell him that he doesn't need to worry about Grodd escaping anymore because he's dead. Ice cold in Gorilla City. This panel of Solivar getting out his phone book to call the Flash, such fun. It's right up there with Perry eating chicken during Lois's love confession. Grodd dead, my old enemy, my most dangerous enemy, gone forever. It's almost too good to be true. See that negativity, Barry? This is why Grodd manifested in a human body. Cause of course Grodd's consciousness transferred to some random man. I guess that guy's life is over, Castiel style, or Wonder Woman 1984 style. He's Grodd now. Ooh, what if he had transferred it into a baby or a toddler, but one of those Silver Age toddlers that talks like a caveman. And then the toddler's trying to get the Flash, still leading a gang of trained chimps. I'm ready for the Silver Age writer's room. Grodd quickly tries to orient himself by going through his new body's pockets. He learns that he is William Dawson, and he just got to town since he was sent there for a job by an employment agency. So he doesn't really have any ties, and he decides, you know what? He's gonna go with the job. So he goes there and he takes it. It turns out it's to be an assistant manager for a sideshow training chimps, which he's able to do quite well since he can just talk to them. The manager just thinks he's some kind of chimp whisperer. Grodd Dawson works there for a while, but then finds that it's boring, just living an average life as an assistant sideshow manager. So he turns the chimps into a criminal gang just to make his life more interesting. So now there's a series of bizarre robberies being reported. Barry is intrigued, but this isn't his department, so he blows off lunch with Iris so he can investigate as the Flash. The excuse he gives is that he's noticed he's gaining some weight. Why lie? Why not just say that work came up? It's entirely plausible given his profession. But he needed to say what he said for maximum irony. The Flash is on the case and he sees it's a chimp gang who he easily captures. And then he learns where they came from, the sideshow, which leads him right to Dawson Grodd. Hearing that his gang's been captured sets Grodd on a quest to stop the Flash once more, because the Flash is again ruining his fun. He feels like he has the ultimate advantage because the Flash doesn't even know that Grodd is still alive. He just thinks Dawson is some ordinary criminal using his mastery of chimp training for evil, so he won't be prepared for the scientific genius. He whips up a nice ray gun in the room of his boarding house. Because the thing about the Flash is you gotta slow him down. One of the really fun things about the Flash, whoever it was pre-New 52, was that a lot of his villains were tech-based. So it was kind of a human ingenuity and cleverness versus innate ability. He was fast, so his villains had to be smart. This also did make his villains who did have extra powers stand out and seem all the more menacing because of it. There was a huge difference not only in attitude but in power level between the Reverse Flash and say Captain Cold. For a time in the early New 52 pre-Rebirth, many rogues were turned into metas, and so just innately have comparable powers, which does challenge him, but in my opinion makes the rogues a bit less unique and fun. But of course, mileage varies. They're leaning a bit techie again. Come on, tech the tech. Reverse the shield polarity. My gun, by special radiation, causes the body to absorb moisture from the air at an incredible rate and swells its victim like a balloon. Then for added injury, somehow one of Grodd's abilities transferred into this new body, which is some of his mental abilities. So he's able to just erase the Flash's identity from his mind. Total amnesia. And then he takes the Flash back to the sideshow to his boss and just tells him what robberies. And this new attraction is gonna make him so much money that he just ignores how shady Dawson is. Wow, is he fat? It sure is funny dressing him up like the Flash. Rude. Also, serious question about the science gun. Shouldn't the Flash still be expanding, or is the effect only when the ray is actually upon you? Because there is a dark story out there somewhere in some multiverse where he just keeps expanding and explodes like the boys. The Flash is plagued by the idea that he used to be somebody important, but he can't remember who. He also remembers that he wasn't always physically like this, but he can't figure out what happened to him. Also, this comic has the word corpulent in it. Corpulent is a great word, plus 10 vocab points. To try to get his mind off things, or just for fun, it's not clear which, they don't actually say why he does it, Barry goes into the Hall of Mirrors. And one of them reveals his former physique. This is enough to trigger his memories, but he still doesn't know how he got to be so big. But he quickly solves it, for he too is a scientist. He figures he must have absorbed a bunch of water really fast. So he goes to a factory that dehydrates potatoes and demands access to their dehydration room, where he just sits with the potatoes. Ew, they need to throw out all those potatoes. The Flash is sweating on people's food. Look, they even show it. The whole batch is ruined. I'm so certain that they sold them anyway. Meanwhile, Dawson is finding that some of his gorilla characteristics are returning. It's not all fun and games, it's not just powers. Like his body is getting hairier. That's scary. There's a very cool horror concept there of consciousness overriding the physical form. Very Fly remake, but from a purely mental perspective. Like Grodd's mind is so powerful, it's just gonna morph this body to his will, to his mental perception of himself. But also he's not fully controlling it. It's interesting. For now, his solution is to shave more, and then suddenly the Flash is at his house. He wandered over there because he figured that Dawson must live there because that's where he was first transformed. But wasn't he heading over there already in the first place with the knowledge that he lived there from his boss? The story could be a bit tighter. I made you the laughing stock of the country, but now I'll make you so fat you'll explode. Did you make him the laughing stock of the whole country, or just a few groups of people who went to the sideshow and who didn't even know that he was the real Flash? You can do better, Grodd, I know you can. But then the Flash pokes his costume with a hat pin, because he sweat all that water onto those potatoes at the factory, but he pumped air into his costume to trick Dawson. Flash costume, incredible stretch, and also able to compress so small. The Flash then actually uses his speed, which he could have done, just burst in and started punching Dawson before he could blink, but then he wouldn't have gone to poke a hole in his costume. He then somehow makes the connection that Dawson appeared right after Grodd died, only that's not actually true. It's a weak connection. The stronger one would have been the chimp gang, wondering how Dawson could train the chimps so well, and then thinking, maybe is there potentially a Grodd connection? But even then that would be a reach because it's not instant. They write it as though Grodd dropped dead and then Dawson appeared right on his radar right away, but that wasn't the case because he actually showed up in town and worked for a bit before he started committing crimes after he got bored. But no matter, it's time for the ending joke payoff. He goes to dinner with Iris and orders a huge meal, and when she asks him isn't he still afraid of gaining weight, he says, not anymore. The end! This story starts off stronger than it finishes. The Grodd taking on a human Sona and training chimps to do crimes for him is pretty solid. The whole 1,000-pound Flash part, not so much. This feels like one of those cover first outings where the writer is struggling to figure out how to make the cover happen. They play it less for a joke than they could have, at least in the text. It is clearly meant to be taken on a more humorous level. Ahaha, laugh at the corpulent Flash like this child at the sideshow. And this grown man. Rude. Narratively, even though it comes out of nowhere with Grodd just inventing a ray gun in the room in his house, it is actually a clever way to slow the Flash down, so it gets bonus points for that. Does it live up to the cover? Well, you do get what the cover promises, but it's potentially not as interesting as it could be, but I don't know what else you would be expecting. Certainly not the trained chimp gang and him sweating all over those potatoes. Some of the Grodd stuff is intriguing, but the joke is pretty weak, especially the through-line one that Barry cancels lunch on. But miles will vary. It may elicit some chuckles. Or some may be bothered by it. It's a fairly forgettable Silver Age outing, based on how wacky and out there the Silver Age can really get. It also is gonna go into the Is Barry Allen boring files. Is Barry Allen boring in the Silver Age specifically? Some of his adventures can be interesting, but is he? This story is certainly not lighting the world on fire, and it's less tight in terms of internal continuity than it could have been. Small details are missed or changed panel to panel, and certain narrative logic flows make it feel like not the most attention was being paid to the story. But now I know the day the Flash was 1,000 pounds. Most memorable thing to me, definitely the Flash sweating on people's food. Traumatizing. There has to be a giant sauna somewhere. So what do you think of this story? Do you have a favorite Silver Age cover? Want to look at more stories behind the wacky covers? Let me know down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. Extra fast today, like the Flash.